My reaction to the initial Buffalo Bills 2025 roster is coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Well, folks, welcome in. We've talked for a long time about the makeup of the Bills roster. And finally, cut down day has come and gone, and we have the initial 53-man roster. And so on this episode, we are going to react to it, talk about the decisions that the Bills made, some of the surprises, some of the disappointments. We'll unpack it all for you here today on Locked On Bills. Now, let's start out by acknowledging that this is the initial roster. It is fluid. This is going to change a lot. It could change tomorrow. Obviously, players have to clear waivers. Teams could claim guys that could change things. And so, look, this is the initial roster. And so it's a very fluid situation. But we have an idea of what this team is going to look like going into week one against the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll talk about it position by position and talk about each of the decisions. We'll start at quarterback. The Bills are keeping two quarterbacks. That's been the number they like to keep. Josh Allen, Mitch Trubisky is the backup. So Mike White, Shane Buechele, both released. And what's interesting to me about those two guys is if both come back or are able to come back on the practice squad, meaning that there's not another practice squad opportunity out there or an active roster opportunity for either player, and the Bills have the chance to bring both back, which one do they pick? It's kind of an interesting situation where Shane Buechele is obviously very accustomed to being that practice squad quarterback, that guy who runs the opposing team's scout team, right? Like, it's an important role. And Mike White was competing for the QB2 job. And so how do they sort that out if they have the opportunity to get both back? Do they pick one? Do they bring them both? It'll be interesting to find out. But this went the way we thought. Speaking of going the ways we thought, running back. The Bills roster 4, including fullback Reggie Gilliam, to go with James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. And so Elijah Young, who was on the team for just a few days before playing in the preseason finale against Tampa Bay, and Frank Gore Jr. are the two running backs that were released. And so I think obviously the priority would be getting Frank Gore back on the practice squad. I know that there's a lot of fan love out there for Frank Gore. He's obviously had two very good preseasons back-to-back. I would be a little surprised if another team claimed him, because if you do claim a player, they have to go on your active roster. So this would be a situation where he would be signed to somebody's 53. And I struggle to see that happening. I mean, you see these stories all the time with the Bills. You think about Raheem Blackshear or Antonio Williams, right? These types of things pop up from time to time, and you generally get the guy back. And so while I do acknowledge that he had a really good preseason, I do think there's a really good chance that the Bills get him back on the practice squad. At wide receiver, I think this is where we had our biggest surprise based on the way things were perceived going into camp, and it's that Tyrell Shavers makes the team. So along with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel, and Elijah Moore, Tyrell Shavers is on this initial 53-man roster. And it's awesome to see. 2 years on the practice squad, and then he just put it all together this preseason, this training camp, and earned the job. I think that's what this comes down to. I think the Bills would have been fine going into the season with 5 receivers. But Tyrell Shavers performed at a level that demanded he made this roster. And I'm really excited to see what the arc is from here. What type of opportunities does he get offensively? Can he be an asset on special teams? Because if that's the case, I think he has a strong case to be an active player on game day over an Elijah Moore, where Elijah Moore, his value comes as the backup to Khalil Shakir. What else can he provide? Not the same thing Shavers does in terms of multiple phases of special teams, offering size and verticality at the receiver position, and a guy that can really live on the perimeter and play that outside role. And so I'm really excited about Shavers making this roster, and just the fact that Sean McDermott preaches now everything is earned. And I just couldn't imagine Tyrell Shavers doing more to earn the opportunity. So he does it. He's here. The latest of the practice squad to the active roster. We've seen it happen with Jamarcus Ingram. We've seen it happen with Cam Lewis. Ike Bucker's done this before. And your latest example is Tyrell Shavers. And the guy has won over a fan base along the way here. So on your initial 53-man roster, 6 receivers, including Tyrell Shavers. So the guys that don't make it, Steven Gosnell, Grant Dubose, Laviska Shenault, KJ Hamler, Deion Kane, and Christian Wilkerson. At tight end, it's exactly what you thought it was going to be. Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Jackson Hawes. Among those released, Matt Sokol, Kaleki Letu, and Zach Davidson. You knew Kincaid and Knox were locks, and then it was just a matter of drafting Jackson Hawes, him validating the exact player you thought he would be, which he did in the preseason, and now he's your tight end 3. And so that comes together in a way that you kind of expected it to. So quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, it's pretty chalky with the exception of Tyrell Shavers earning a spot as the wide receiver 6, and a super fun story here as we start this 2025 season. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the trenches, O-line, D-line, and it's set for now, but you obviously know that things are going to be fluid here, so we'll get into all of that here on the other side of it. Folks, please be sure to stick with me. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Check this out. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Folks, I love using FanDuel. One of my favorite things is to check each morning what the profit boosts are. You can usually go on there and they'll give you like a 30% profit boost for a same game parlay, or if there's some type of sporting event, there'll be some cool promotions. I love checking that out. Plus, there's so many different ways that you can bet, whether it's spreads, you can bet over-unders, player props, build same-game parlays. You can live bet. It's all there for you, and it just makes watching sports more exciting. So whether it's football, baseball, basketball, golf, you have a little something on it. It makes it that much more exciting. So check it out. Are you ready to play? If so, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets. Welcome back, folks. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered in for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find a link in today's show notes. We appreciate you taking the time to help us out. All right, we're continuing to react to the initial 53-man roster. We've talked quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. Now we're getting into the trenches. We'll start with the offensive line, where the Bills are keeping 9. And there's some interesting layers to this. The 5 starters, Deion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, Spencer Brown, all on the team. Your backups, Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandemark, Chase Lunt, and Sedrick Van Pran Granger. So some interesting things here. First of all, Tylen Grable, goes to injured reserve, designated for return. He's had this concussion, and it is certainly taking him some time to work back from it. That's pretty concerning. Typically when concussions are longer, they are longer. So I hope everything's okay there. Head injuries are always very serious, and it's unfortunate. And I think the domino here is that Chase Lunt is on this roster because of Tylen Grable and him working back from this concussion. I think if Tylen Grable was healthy, Chase Lunt would have been released. So that, I think, is your domino there. And I think when Tylen Grable's ready to go, I think Chase Lunt will be waived and then hopefully brought back, on the practice squad. The other interesting note here is that Sedrick Van Pran Granger was elevated or activated from the PUP list and on this roster. That says a lot about two things. Number one, where Sedrick Van Pran Granger is in his return from the calf injury that kept him out for the entire training camp and preseason. He missed the whole thing. And now he's activated, which is great. But also, it's a big signal to me about the level of confidence that the Bills have in this guy. They could have bought more time. They could have kept him on the PUP list. They didn't. They activated him. That's a great signal for what the team thinks of Sedrick Van Pran Granger, especially for a guy entering his second season that barely played as a rookie and missed all of camp and preseason. Said, yeah, come on in. You're one of our backup offensive linemen. That says a lot. It's pretty significant. So I would perceive your first in at offensive tackle to be Ryan Vandemark right now. Your first in at interior offensive line, guard center, to be Alec Anderson. Then it would be Chase Lunt, and then it would be Sedrick Van Pran Granger on the interior. I think that's how the depth shakes out for now. So Tylen Grable to injured reserve, and then the Bills released Rush Reimer, Richard Garage, Mike Edwards, Jacob Bear, Dan Feeney, Travis Clayton, and Kendrick Green. Important note on Travis Clayton, he's part of the International Pathway Program. So practice squads in the NFL are 16 players. The Bills can have Travis Clayton as one of their practice squad players and get a bonus 17th guy. And I think that's exactly what will happen with Travis Clayton. But the fact that Travis Clayton pretty much missed all of last year and then came back this year, and remember, never played football, right? Never played, rugby player from England. And the fact that he got reps in preseason games is a good sign that there's a positive trajectory here. Obviously, expectations are low because obviously it would be a long shot for this to work out. But the fact that he was on the field in preseason games in his second year ever playing football, I think is a good sign for where he's at. And then obviously next year will define whether or not he'll stick in football or if that'll be the end of the line. But I think he's on an encouraging path. Obviously, you want to get, to me, I'd really love for the Bills to get one of Dan Feeney or Kendrick Green back on the practice squad to have that veteran. I think that would be meaningful. So I'm actively rooting for that to happen. So that's offensive line. The Bills roll with 9. Then you have defensive end and defensive tackle. We'll start with defensive tackle because this whole Jordan Phillips thing, we finally got some clarity on this as we reacted to this yesterday on the podcast, and the initial understanding is that he was signed to the active roster, which he was, but he was only signed to the active roster for the purposes of being able to start being in the facility and working out. And then, of course, he was actually released, and then the full expectation is that he's brought back on the practice squad. So any concerns that existed about this is going to take away from one of the young players or something goofy is going to happen with one of these other players, it's not the case. Jordan Phillips is a practice squad player, which was always the more logical idea. But when the reports were that he was signed to the active roster, which he was, you can't help but kind of take yourself to a weird space mentally and start to wonder, like, what is really going on with this? So he's on the practice squad. So the Bills roster 5 defensive tackles: Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders, Dwayne Carter. Of course, Larry Ogunjobi is suspended for the first 6 games. And then the Bills release Casey Rogers, Zion Logue, and Marcus Harris. I certainly want Zion Logue back on the practice squad. My fear there is Atlanta actually drafted him last year, and then the Bills signed him off of Atlanta's practice squad. And Atlanta's got a massive need at D tackle. I could see them claiming him on waivers, but if he clears waivers, I'd love to get him back on the practice squad. At defensive end, the Bills also keep 5 of those. Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, Landon Jackson, Javon Solomon, Michael Hoyt is suspended. And then you actually cut Nelson Caesar and Parrish Shand. That goes exactly how you expected it to go. I think what's interesting about these two position groups is, what do you do when Ogunjobi and Hoyt are ready to come back? Where does the roster spot come? And I think this is going to take on a life of its own. I said this on Bill's squad, but I think the first 6 weeks of the season, so the Bills play 6 games, they have a bye, then it's Carolina, then it's Kansas City. I think the first 6 weeks of the season, the Bills will feel things out. And then from there, I think you'll probably look at your opportunities to bring back Hairston, to bring back Grable, to bring back Ogunjobi, to bring back Hoyt. And whether it's injuries, performance, I think there's going to be a bit of a reset with this roster coming out of that bye week, which actually happens in week 7. So that's where I think this goes. And it'll take on a life of its own. The Bills might have a surplus right now at receiver. They might actually want 5. Maybe a player is really taking off in a way that you didn't expect, and another guy's pushed to the side, and now that player is expendable. But I'm looking at the first 6 weeks as really a showcase opportunity, and then a reset coming with significant roster changes coming out of that last game before the bye into Carolina out of the bye. All right, coming up next, linebacker, corner, safety, specialists. I think there's a positive story as it relates to the cornerback position that we'll get into here next. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo, and you should too, whether it's your first ever league or a veteran creating your millionth league. With season kickoff on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football with offers, which offers so many different fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew? No problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, let's talk defensive back 7 and specialists. At linebacker, the Bills keep 5. And I'm excited about this. This has been a position that I think the Bills have unnecessarily kept 6 in the past. So I think they come in at a normal number here with 5. Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, Dorian Williams, Joe Andreessen, Shaq Thompson. So Jimmy Charlo, Edefon Ulafosio, Keonta Jenkins are among those that were released. Look, Shaq Thompson, you kind of just felt it early in camp. He was coming into his own. He was playing well. He's versatile, can play both spots, has been a green dot player in the league. And I think he was able to hold off, a guy like Edefon Ulafosio, who, was a draft pick, a 5th-round pick last year. Of course, Balin Spector was already been dealt with as a guy that's been waived. I think Shaq Thompson really elevates this linebacker depth in ways that we might not be appreciating right now, to be honest with you. So I know that was kind of a afterthought signing post-draft. You didn't think much of it, but I think Shaq has kind of earned his way, and you could see the appeal for him being on this roster to elevate this linebacker depth. So Charlo, Ulafosio, Jenkins didn't make it, but I'm sure they'll try to get some of those guys back on the practice squad, and I know we're all rooting for Jimmy Charlo. At corner, I think there's a good story to tell here. So Maxwell Harrison starts the year on injured reserve, designated for return. So he's got to miss at least 4 games. And obviously there's 2 layers to the Maxwell Harrison thing. First of all, he's got to get his knee right. Second of all, he's got to get ready to play. And that's a tough needle to thread because early in camp, you saw some highs, you saw some lows. And so you kind of have to leave him where you found him. Oh, by the way, get your knee right. So I think the Bills will take their time with him. They should. But I think a lot of the ceiling of this defense that we get excited about is rooted in Maxwell Harrison and his skill set. So I am excited to get him back out there and to see, what happens with Tre'Davius White. But when you put Hairston on IR and then you release Dane Jackson, who started 28 games for you since 2020, that's a good sign for this injury to Tre'Davius White that we still don't really know what the situation is. If there was a level of concern for Tre'Davius White missing multiple weeks, you probably hold on to Dane Jackson, especially with Harrison starting on injured reserve. So maybe the Bills dodged a bullet there with the Trey White situation, which we will learn more about on Wednesday. Brandon Beane is going to talk to the media on Wednesday, and surely, he can only hide so much from giving an actual update. The last he said is that they're awaiting the results of an MRI, and once those are done, they would share more information. Well, you have those results, so we should hear something on Wednesday. Certainly hope that we do. But I think the way that this shapes out is a good sign for Trey White and where he's at. So the Bills at corner, they keep 6, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, Tre'Davious White, Jamarcus Ingram, Dorian Strong, and Brandon Codrington. I know Brandon Codrington has been an interesting conversation. He's a guy that brings a lot of value as a returner, but really nothing else, right? He doesn't play other phases of special teams. He can't play defense at all. But here's what it comes down to. Brandon Codrington is undeniably the best returner the Bills have. And that's it. I think that's what it comes down to. Sean McDermott said that 3 players are making this team for special teams only, and that doesn't include the specialists, meaning long snapper, kicker, and punter. I think that's what it came down to. While Codrington is deficient in the ways he can help this roster, he is, without a doubt, the best returner this team has. I wish he did more. I really do. But you cannot deny that role that he fills, he's the best at it. And it avoids Khalil Shakir being the punt returner. It avoids Ty Johnson or Ray Davis being the kick returner. And these returns are going to be a big part of the game this year. The best guy that can handle it is Brandon Codrington. So while I have been hopeful that the Bills could find a different solution, I don't think they could. And it came down to, this is the best guy for the job. We got to roll with it. Again, that could change. I mean, when Hairston's ready to come back or a different player, that could change. But he's clearly the Bills' best return man, and he's primed to handle that role again this year. Where I am interested, though, is if Tre'Davious White can't go in week 1, who is it? Is it Jamarcus Ingram? Is it Dorian Strong? Well, Dorian Strong's been playing over Jamarcus Ingram in the preseason games. It would signal to me that he's ahead of him on the depth chart. Is this really going to be the case? Is Dorian Strong going to be the starter opposite of Christian Benford in week 1? It's not that crazy to think. At safety, the Bills keep 5. Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop, DeMar Hamlin, Cam Lewis, Jordan Hancock. They cut Garnett Hollis, Trey Herndon, and Derek Forrest. I am disappointed about Derek Forrest. I don't think he should have made the roster based on the way that camp and preseason unfolded. I don't think he did enough to earn a roster spot. But when the Bills signed him, I was hopeful that he could. Liked him at Cincinnati. I liked him when he was a starter with Washington. And, he kind of got lost in the transition when they switched over the regime. And he came free and came to Buffalo. But obviously didn't do enough to beat out Hamlin, to beat out Cam Lewis. And so it's just not, it doesn't feel like it's going to happen. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen. But he's a player that still intrigues me. But, I mean, the reality is this is 3 years in a row now for the guy that he's not really been able to earn a role. And he didn't make this team. And obviously it was a really modest contract anyways to begin with. So we'll see where his career goes. I think he's skilled. I really do. But he's got to be able to convince somebody that he's worthy of an opportunity. And he's not been able to do that now for a few years. Specialists, there was no competition here. Reed Ferguson, Tyler Bass, Brad Robbins, are your specialists for the Bills. So that's the initial 53. A lot of this is chalk. It really is. I think you get Tyrell Shavers, that makes it. The Bills go 5 at linebacker. The Bills roll with Codrington at corner. Trey White doesn't have he's not on IR to start the year. Grable and Harrison start on IR. I mean, it really didn't come through with a ton of surprises or crazy things. And that's why I think that this first 6 weeks is really important, because I think there's going to be a transition coming out of the bye. So this is the group for now, but there will be changes, and I think there'll be significant changes coming out of the bye. All right, folks, there you have it. The initial 53, my reaction to it here on this episode of Locked On Bills. Thanks for being here, folks. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.